I want to bring in Thomas Gift in London from UCL, a politics professor and expert of all things US. Thomas, great to have you on the programme today. First of all, let me get your reaction as where are we? Nearly 11 o'clock here, 10 o'clock in the UK. What your thoughts are as it appears Donald Trump is on the cusp of presidency.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you. I do think that this was a historic comeback from Donald Trump, and it was a resounding victory. And I think whenever Kamala Harris looks back to try to figure out what went wrong, it won't be about the small stuff. It won't be about failing to choose a different vice presidential candidate, although I do think that Josh Shapiro would have made sense given the importance of Pennsylvania. It won't be about failing to court the Arab American vote in Michigan. It'll be about the big stuff. Americans ultimately vote on the big stuff, the economy, cost of living, immigration, Afghanistan. I'm really not convinced that a different Democratic candidate could have had much of a different outcome. I think you could almost insert any generic Democrat, and the conclusion would be very similar to what we saw tonight.
So when you talk about the big stuff, you clearly talk about the economy. You mentioned immigration as well. We were talking a moment ago about the difference in personalities and whether Kamala Harris could have made a difference if she'd have been as forthright and perhaps as strong as Donald Trump. But then you're playing a similar game where, a lot of things Donald Trump has said, and our colleague Philip pointed out, the Springfield eating the cats and dogs, for example, they were demonstrably untrue. And yet he has a weight with what he said. The question for you, really, do you think any Democratic candidate, aside from Kamala Harris, could have beaten Donald Trump right now?
I don't. Donald Trump is a uniquely iconoclastic and charismatic politician. And I think sort of getting into a game of personalities is not going to end well for the competitor. At the same time, I think that Kamala Harris failed to articulate a clear set of policies that might override some of those concerns that you just expressed. And in fact, not only did she not articulate a clear set of policies, she seemed to flip-flop on a number of major issues from back when she was running for president in 2020 in the primaries. She used to be against fracking. Now she says that she's not. She used to be for looser immigration policies. Now she says that she's not. She used to be for Medicare for all. Now she says that she's not. And so I think Americans are really asking, who is Kamala Harris? What does she represent? She says that her values haven't changed, but her policy prescriptions for the country certainly have.
It's very interesting, Thomas. Let me bring in Andrew at this point. Andrew, do you agree that no other candidate in the Democrats right now, given the role that Donald Trump is on, could have made a difference?
Well, it was very hard with Joe Biden dropping out in July. But, the one figure I think might have made a difference would have been kind of a dream candidate, Michelle Obama. She was clearly not willing to do this. We can understand why she wouldn't. But I think she had the kind of charisma, and this was an election about charisma, as really everyone has said. Donald Trump, whatever one thinks of him, has a charisma, has an appeal, which Kamala Harris just was unable to project and doesn't have. Michelle Obama probably would have had that, but that's like saying, what if cats could fly?
Clear orator. Always talked about when they go low, we go high. Very interesting as well, Thomas, if you're still with us, I'd just like your sense of the moment we're at. If we're listening to Donald Trump on stage at 2:30 in the morning at Mar-a-Lago with this array of characters from his family and Melania. He had Elon Musk with him at Mar-a-Lago. They had Dana White, the head of the UFC Ultimate Cage Fighting Championships. All of these characters. What you make of a potential Trump presidency and potentially with the Senate and representatives behind him?
Well, certainly for Trump, having a unified government in Washington is going to help get his legislative agenda through. And he's articulated sort of an agenda that includes making tax cuts permanent that were originally passed in 2017. They were set to expire this year. He's called for slashing the corporate tax rate from 21% 15%. He's talked about eliminating taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. He's also, of course, importantly talked about raising tariffs, which is crucial for us over here in Europe. He has called for upwards of 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports into the United States and up to 60% tariffs on imports from China. What I'm really looking at is how Donald Trump sets the tone now from here on out at his inauguration and any speeches that he gives in the interim. Is he going to try to strike a conciliatory tone? I'm not very convinced that he will be, given how he governed in the past. Will he carry out this retribution tour that he has pledged to? I think that that is something certainly that Washington is bracing for at the moment.
Thomas, we've got 7 results to go. So right now, as the projected results stand, the 270 being the magic number, Donald Trump on 266, Kamala Harris on 219. Pennsylvania, that tipping point state, already being projected to Donald Trump. It hasn't been called by the news networks yet, aside from Fox News. We're waiting to hear from Associated Press, which has all thousands of reporters at the counts. Can you see an even slim, narrow prospect for Kamala Harris at this point?
I can't. I think that this is a fait accompli. I think that Harris probably should come out now and announce her concession. She's talked about the importance of conceding when you've lost an electoral outcome. I think now is the time. I mean, the odds I recently saw of Kamala Harris now getting to the White House are less than 1%, which essentially means that this is a done deal.
When you listen to the rhetoric of Donald Trump, one for superlatives, we all know that, but when he says this is the ultimate comeback historically in US politics, you agree with him?
Well, it's hard to think of any other politician that was on a similar trajectory as Trump and managed to become ascendant in the way that Trump has. It's not just about Trump, it's about Trumpism and this new political movement, or a rebirth of the political movement that he has been so successful in projecting. One of the things about Donald Trump is that experts have talked about his demise over and over and over. All the scandals and the mini scandals, all of the allegations, all of the headlines, impeachment 1.0, impeachment 2.0, convictions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can just go down the line. At each point, we heard sort of the intelligentsia tell us that this was the end of Donald Trump. Certainly it is not. He seems to have 9 lives and then some.
Back to the cat references again. Thomas, before we let you go, just briefly, when you talk about Trumpism, and you're looking ahead, how would you define Trumpism and what it's doing to the Republican Party?
Well, Trump has managed to build a unique coalition that has reached out in particular to white working class voters, particularly in deindustrializing states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and my home state of Pennsylvania. But it's also managed to curb this notion of demographics being destiny for the Democratic Party. There was sort of an idea that as immigration increased, as the country became more diverse, that these would be natural political voters for the Democrats. Trump has managed to make inroads. That's despite all of the racially charged and racist rhetoric. He has just managed to kind of make headway with some of these demographics that for a long time had been written off by the Republican Party.
You talk about Pennsylvania. I'm really interested in just your contacts there, your time there, because we talk about these 3 Rust Belt states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania that had the industrial steel heart ripped out of them. General Motors leaving, 80s, 90s, hence the name from steel to the Rust Belt. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talked about how there were new industries being built. The chip industry is being built there. But were you surprised then tonight to hear that it had gone towards Trump, or the conversations you had suggested that actually Pennsylvania may go that way?
Well, I had spent actually the last 6 months in Pennsylvania. My family's still there, so I was kind of keeping a close eye on what happened in Pennsylvania, simply because it did look like from the outset this was going to be the bellwether state. Not only does it have 19 electoral votes, but it's really a good indicator of how Wisconsin will go and how Michigan would go. I'm from a very conservative area of Pennsylvania called Franklin County, which is in the south central part of the state. It's about 70% Republican. So, of course, my experiences are colored by that, but there was a huge amount of momentum for Trump. You saw bumper stickers out, you saw flags out, you saw signs up, and both candidates put an enormous amount of resources into Pennsylvania. I talked to my parents just the other day, and they said that they had received 9 flyers from the 2 candidates combined in 9 days. Both candidates spent more time in Pennsylvania than any other state. They invested more resources in Pennsylvania than any other state. On the Republican side, Elon Musk essentially hunkered down there for the last several months. Not only did he donate $75 million to his own super PAC, but he was entering Pennsylvanians in random drawings to win $1 million if they went to his PAC and signed a pro-Trump pledge. So Pennsylvania, I think, was always going to be the dispositive state. I think that it will turn out to be in this case, and ultimately it turned red.
Thomas, great to talk to you. Thank you for being on the programme, Director of US Politics at UCL in London. Andrew, just listening to that, one thing that strikes me, I was talking to a voter in Pennsylvania. His point to me was, just a couple of weeks ago, look at the billboards. And some of them said, if you want $1.24 less on your gas, vote Trump. Perhaps indicative.
I think you're right. I think, some of the prices that Americans look at most commonly, gas prices and grocery prices, clearly spiked up during the pandemic. Although they've come down, inflation has moderated. In fact, I think Joe Biden did quite a good job bringing the American economy back. People see these prices. People see the prices that they're paying every day. And housing prices too. But yeah, I think this belief that somehow Donald Trump could turn things around to a pre-pandemic world, which is not going to happen. And as so many economists have said, imposing tariffs on European goods, on Chinese goods, is only going to cause greater inflation and will cause more hardship for American consumers. So the idea of things turning around is fanciful.
Andrew, very